Welcome back to the Token Launch Masterclass. This is episode 15, and we're calling this one Fair Launch or Flawed Fantasy, the pros and cons of the LBP. Let's get right to it. Everyone in crypto talks about a fair launch. It's the holy grail, but does it actually exist? I've seen countless teams try to achieve it, only to get their liquidity drained by bots in the first 3 seconds. The question I always ask founders is, how do you let your real community get a fair shake? One popular and frankly controversial answer is the Liquidity Bootstrapping Pool, or LBP. On paper, it's an elegant solution, but for every team I've seen use one successfully, I've seen another create a white-knuckle, FUD-filled nightmare for their buyers. Today, we're dissecting it, the brilliant design, and the treacherous pitfalls. We're going to look at why it's a bot killer, but also how it can go catastrophically wrong. So what exactly is an LBP? Let's forget the jargon for a minute. The simplest way I explain it to founders is to think of it as a descending price sale, almost like a Dutch auction. Imagine an item at a store that starts at a very high price, and a timer begins. Over the next 72 hours, the price is programmed to automatically drop. Now in crypto, this store is just a pool with two assets, the new project token and a collateral asset, usually something like USDC. The magic here is what I call the heavy thumb on the scale. The system is designed to constantly push the price down. If a lot of people start buying, their demand can slow the fall or even push the price up temporarily. But the natural gravity is always pulling it lower. It's this constant dance between downward pressure and real-time buyer demand that makes it so unique. So, the first and most powerful advantage, the primary reason teams even consider this model, is that it's the ultimate bot killer. What I always see in a standard launch is a race to the bottom. Bots pile in, scoop up the cheap supply, and dump on the community. It's over in seconds. An LBP completely flips that script. Think about it from the bot's perspective. Its prime directive is to buy instantly, but here, the price starts artificially high. Buying in that first block is a guaranteed way to get the worst possible price. The bot's simple logic is broken. It can't snipe the launch because that's a losing trade. This simple mechanic creates a calm space. It gives you, the human buyer, time to breathe, watch the price discover itself, and decide on your own terms when to participate. You aren't fighting scripts, you're just participating in a market. This brings us to the second major advantage, and for me, it's one of the most elegant aspects of a well-run LBP, organic and extended price discovery. Think about a typical IDO. It's often a 30-second explosion of chaos. It's a frenzy. FOMO is maxed out, and the initial price is just a byproduct of that first-minute stampede. What I really like to watch with an LBP is how the process unfolds over hours or even days. This extended period lets the initial hype burn off. It allows thousands of individuals to weigh in, not all at once, but thoughtfully over time. You might find that watching the price chart isn't about catching a rocket, but about seeing a community collectively decide what a token is truly worth. It's a real-time negotiation between buy pressure and the system's downward drift. The final price isn't a fluke, it's a consensus. So far, we've focused on the buyer, but let's step into the founder's shoes for a moment. This is where I see the true elegance of the LBP design. When I'm advising a team, one of the biggest hurdles is always upfront capital. If you want to launch on a standard exchange, you often need a 50-50 pool. That means for every $100,000 of your new token you want to make liquid, you have to pony up $100,000 of ETH or USDC. That's a huge barrier. What I find so powerful about the LBP is that you can completely flip this ratio. You might start a pool with 98% project tokens and only 2% collateral. This means a team can create a deep, liquid market with just a fraction of the treasury needed for a traditional launch. It fundamentally lowers the barrier to entry, allowing brilliant, bootstrapped projects to get off the ground without massive venture capital backing. So, we've laid out a compelling case. It kills bots, it helps teams with limited capital, and it facilitates genuine price discovery. On paper, it sounds almost perfect. And this brings me to the crucial question I always get asked. If the design is so clever, why are LBPs often one of the most stressful and nerve-wracking experiences for participants? What I've found is that this is the point where brilliant theory collides with messy human psychology. This is the pivot point, where the promise of a fair launch can suddenly start to feel like a flawed fantasy. The machine is working as intended, but our own instincts start working against us. So let's explore that. Let's talk about why this elegant system can be so frightening in practice. Let's talk about the number one con, what I call the psychological gauntlet for buyers. Everything in our trading brain is wired to buy assets that are going up. But an LBP's defining feature is a price that is designed by default to go down. Mechanically, this makes perfect sense. Psychologically, it's a minefield. What I often see is that this creates immense FUD. You might find yourself watching the price drop, thinking, I'll just wait for it to get a little cheaper. The problem is, so is everyone else. I've seen so many people wait too long, miss the inflection point when buying pressure finally takes over, and completely miss their entry. And on the flip side, what happens when you do buy? The price almost certainly continues its downward drift for a while. That feeling, that immediate post-purchase dip can be brutal and make you feel like you made a terrible mistake, even when you haven't. This brings us to a common myth I hear all the time, that LBPs are totally manipulation-proof. I found that's just not true. Sophisticated players can still game this system. What I look out for is a tactic called price suppression. You might find yourself watching the price drop and keep dropping far faster than the curve suggests it should. It feels like nobody is buying. Often, what's happening is a large whale or a coordinated group is deliberately sitting on the sidelines. They're letting the price fall, creating maximum fear. Then, in the final hours, when it's artificially low, they step in and scoop up a huge bag for a fraction of what early buyers paid. It's a calculated psychological play. So what I do in these situations is watch the on-chain activity just as much as the price chart, to see if big money is just waiting in the wings. And this leads me to the biggest risk of all, one that's less about market games and more about the team itself. You might find that the LBP feels broken from the start, and that's because a poorly configured one is a recipe for disaster. What I always do is check the parameters before I even think about participating. What are the starting and ending weights? A team that sets the price curve too aggressively might see the price hit the floor before the community even wakes up. How long is it? A 24-hour LBP creates far more urgency than a 72-hour one. But above all, what I look for is the team's integrity. Are they communicating clearly? Are they transparent about the setup? An LBP is just a tool, and its success is completely in the hands of the people running it. I found that a competent, transparent team can navigate almost any market condition, while an unprepared one can fail even with a perfect product. All right, let's look at some real-world examples. Theory is one thing, but what I like to do is see how these actually play out in the wild. I recall a gaming project that absolutely nailed it. You might find the price chart almost boring, a smooth, gradual decline met by steady, organic buying. The result? Thousands of unique wallets got in. That's what a successful launch looks like, wide distribution. On the flip side, I watched a DeFi launch that became a case study in what not to do. The team configured the starting price so high that it felt completely broken, then went silent. What I saw was FUD taking over the community. The price plummeted, and in the final hours, a few large wallets, which were likely waiting all along, swept the floor. It perfectly illustrates how poor configuration and a lack of trust can turn a fair launch into a whale's playground. So where does this leave us? The big question: is an LBP the right tool for your project? What I tell founders is that this isn't a silver bullet. I see it as a powerful but highly specialized tool, definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution. The ideal conditions I look for are pretty clear. First, you need a strong, pre-existing community that already understands the vision. You need a crowd of believers, not just speculators, ready to engage. Second, the project's focus has to be on long-term value. If the plan is just a quick pump, the LBP's mechanics will work against you. And finally, what I see as non-negotiable is a team prepared for intensive communication. You have to be in the trenches with your community for the entire event. If those pieces aren't in place, you might find that other models, like an IDO with strong whitelisting, are a much safer path. So, what's our final takeaway on LBPs? What I always come back to is this: they are an incredibly powerful tool for fighting bots and enabling real price discovery. But you might find their success is fragile. It really hinges on two critical things: a community that's savvy enough to understand the unique psychological pressure, and a founding team that you can absolutely trust to be transparent and competent. Without both, the entire fair launch promise can crumble. Thanks for walking through this deep dive with me. This brings us perfectly to our next topic. Next time, we're evolving beyond simple sign-up forms in episode 16, titled Whitelisting 2.0. From Gleam giveaways to proof of contribution, what I'm excited to explore are the innovative new ways projects are rewarding true community value, instead of just rewarding the fastest person to fill out a form.
If you find this information useful, we would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe this channel to help others find us. If there are subjects you would like covered, please add in the comment section, and we will include it in future episodes.